live. We're gonna give it a minute and see where it ends up, right? Hold on. Let me catch up. Good morning, good morning. I hope all is well. And let me pop in. Okay. Perfect. I see that, and I'm where I need to be. All right, perfect. And it's 8:30, so I'm just gonna roll into it, right? Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you decide to pop on later, I always appreciate it. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord, and today we are going over something a little bit different, right? So instead of talking about any specific bird species or different patterns that might be going on with them right now. We're going to be talking about some feeders specifically, more so like the smart feeders. So those are the bird cameras, in case anybody has been, well, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of them already. They've been out on the market for probably like a few years now. And just to clarify what this presentation is not, it's not going to be a promotional thing saying like, yes, this brand is the best, or like, oh, this one has the best camera or the best ID or all that kind of stuff. Because I have dealt with only a few brands myself. So if anything, this is going to be more of a discussion about if you are considering a smart feeder or potentially wanting to add another one or potentially considering what to look for. I'm hoping to give you a very simplified breakdown of what these feeders entail and also different features or things to consider with that too. So if you happen to have any questions during the presentation, feel free to leave a comment. If it's something that I'm not sure how to answer right away, I will be sure to address the comment later once I gather some information as well with that too. So we're gonna go ahead and just jump right into it, right? So as I mentioned, honestly, I've heard these referred to more as bird feeders with the camera rather than smart feeders themselves, but they are technically referred to as both. So if you're trying to research them, smart feeders might be a good way to put it in the search bar, right? But essentially, they have really exploded over the years. Originally starting out with like the Bird Buddy brand and then going through a lot of different styles and choices as well. So you can have seed feeders, hummingbird feeders. They also make bird baths with cameras and also nest boxes too. So wide variety of styles, wide variety of brands, and essentially all of these have a camera that can run 24/7 as long as it's charged. That gives you good visibility of the birds through the day and the night. These often get set up with a smartphone app. So you do have to download an app on your phone and basically sync up the two options there. It all connects on Wi-Fi. And oftentimes, while this camera is running, whenever there is a bird or potentially squirrel or other activity at the feeder, you'll get an alert on your phone and get notifications, so you can check out what animal is currently visiting your feeders, right? Which is really fun. Some people get a little miffed about the amount of notifications they receive, but I'm fairly confident that it's something you can adjust within the settings of that app as well. Now, depending on the brand and the style that you get, there are also a lot of add-on accessories, right? So there are some that have suet ball feeders, there's a fruit feeder option, hummingbird feeders that could be swapped out or added on with the seed feeder, which sometimes may be a little bit more chaotic depending on if you want to try and do both at the same time. And then some even have guards or trays. So if you're trying to stick with a lot of your smaller birds, don't want to deal with like doves or grackles, there are some brands that have that type of guard as well. So definitely feel free to do your research. And even if you don't have some of these accessories, that doesn't mean you can't have as much of a good time without them. Some blends of seed do come with, like, for example, our plus blends have bark butter bits, which is a type of suet nugget. Some have dried fruit as well. So you can always kind of play around with some of those things with the blend rather than needing the accessory. But it comes down to individual preference, so definitely take a look at that as you're kind of considering what feeder you're looking into, right? So again, the feeders themselves can have a variety of different features that they might advertise. Some may include two-way audio, so oftentimes if you're getting any video, you can often hear the birds chirping, and you can also, for any reason, talk to them. Or if you have a squirrel that's suddenly coming up, you can try and tell the squirrel to leave. Some also do have squirrel alarms, which I will definitely let you know. Might work the first few times, but if you continuously use it and the squirrel realizes, oh, nothing else is going to happen, they'll just sit there while you yell at it and continue to eat food. So don't let the squirrel alarm be the only feature that makes you think that that feeder is the one for you, right? Some also have AI bird identification or photo recognition software that essentially help identify the birds as you're watching them. Others may have a solar power battery charger, some that are attached to the roof of the feeder, and then some that are a separate accessory that comes with the feeder but needs to be mounted in a different location. Oftentimes has a wire that leads to the feeder itself. So keep that in mind. Some people might prefer it attached or separated. There's also the option for mounting or hanging hardware, which we'll talk about the pros and cons of that later. But some are made specifically for hanging. Some may have the option for both. And we'll talk a bit more about that in the future. So they usually do come with a variety of things, some a little bit different than others. So again, definitely paying attention to that as well will give you a good idea as to what kind you're looking for. So personally, I am more of a traditional birder. I do not have a smart feeder myself, just because I feel like I have enough feeders and I don't want to take care of anymore. I'm good with what I have. But I do recognize the benefits that do come to having a smart feeder or a camera set up at the feeders in general, right? So one of those that's really fun is accessibility. Obviously, these smart feeders let you view the birds from anywhere, whether that's when you're working in the office or if it's the comfort of your home, but you can't necessarily look out the window right now, you're busy doing other things, or if you're miles away and just curious as to what's going on at the feeder at home. Definitely you get that accessibility, because sometimes it's hard to pay attention to nature when life gets really chaotic. So this is just kind of a fun reminder that way. It's a really good close-up view of bird activity. So a lot of behaviors maybe you had trouble seeing before are very up close and personal, and it's really interesting to see them interact. You have different species interacting with each other. So maybe you'll notice that your red bellies, like the picture here, can be super sassy to some of your other smaller songbirds. So it's really fun to see kind of what's going on there. This is also great for those with maybe poor vision or potentially mobility issues. Maybe they don't have a good place that's comfortable to watch the feeders outside. This does allow for a closer view, which is fantastic. And you can also share your bird feeder like camera setup with friends and family. They just have to get the app as well, and they can kind of log in and see what's going on at your feeders. This can be really fun if you've got friends from across the country and you kind of want to see the different birds that you have, or if you have family that can't really have a bird feeder right now. It just kind of helps share the love in that regard as well too, which can be really fun. And not only that, but it also provides a lot more awareness as to what's going on in your yard, right? So, again, life gets busy, so we're not always watching the feeders 24/7. Certain periods of time, like migration in the spring and the fall, you can often have uncommon visitors or migrants that are passing through. So the rose-breasted grosbeak is a common visitor during spring migration, which maybe you would not have seen if it wasn't recorded on the camera. Certain mutations, and when I say that, I don't mean anything scary, I just mean like if you've ever heard about the yellow cardinals, or potentially like your leucistic individuals that are like a step away from albino, so they still have some color, but they might have white feathers or lighter pigmentation. You potentially might see some of that as well too, which is really cool. Hybrids as well, which are documented in certain cases, but not always seen too often, might also pop up on these cameras. So sometimes it's really fun to see a lot more that we weren't always aware of, which is really cool. Again, unseen behaviors, so interactions between different species, how these birds actually forage or crack open their food. You can see a lot more of that because, they don't know you're watching, and it's also very up close and personal. Citizen science aspects are also really cool. So last weekend, there was the Great Backyard Bird Count, which essentially all you have to do is count your birds for 15 minutes, the species that you see and the number of individuals you see, and you upload that to eBird or on Merlin ID, and basically you're helping ornithologists from around the world know current bird movements and patterns that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise without you, which is really cool. Feeder Watch is a months-long endeavor as well of kind of the same process. eBird is one of the resources you can use to upload this information to. But sometimes having those birds up close makes it easier to see the species you're working with, which can be a whole lot of fun for contributing to those citizen science projects as well. And then on the less fun aspect, this does also let you know about diseases or illnesses that may be coming up in your yard currently, right? So essentially things like conjunctivitis, which are very common in finches and spread very quickly, are essentially like the version of pink eye, right? So their eyes get really swelled shut, and it's very hard for them to survive because they can't see anything, and birds rely heavily on their sight. So being aware of that, or even avian pox when you have kind of pustules that can be on their beak or their legs or things like that. These are highly contagious, and knowing about them can make you more proactive in trying to help the birds as well. So taking down your feeders, cleaning them, sanitizing them, and then leaving them down for 2 weeks before you test and see if those individuals are still around or if it has in fact cleared up. So that is also a nice thing about the awareness of what's going on at your feeders as well. So outside of that, when you're looking at different models to consider, there's definitely a few things I want to point out. First off, size and the construction of it, right? So this needs to be something that you can easily access. And a lot of these feeders can be pretty chunky. They often hold a larger capacity of seed. So depending on mobility and what you're comfortable with, keeping that in mind as you're checking things out is very helpful. Ease of access to fill the feeders is actually very important too. So some of them have a lid that just pop up, so you have a very easy spout to pour in. Others kind of flip open from the back, and some people might feel that that's a bit small of a space to work with. Along with that, cleaning capabilities, because you have lots of nooks and crannies that if anything gets wet or it's hot, humid, and rainy, stuff's going to mold, and we still need to be able to clean these feeders just as well. So being able to take apart the feeder in its entirety, or knowing how it comes apart and being comfortable with getting into all those nooks and crannies is very important. We've had the models that I've worked with, just to clarify, are like the Bird Reel, some of the Metal S Bird Fee, and then I've heard a little bit about the Bird Buddy. I don't have any myself. I know that the Bird Reel specifically comes apart from top to bottom, which gives you very clean access, which I really enjoy as well too. But making sure you have that ability is very important. Camera placement and attachment. So there are some that are attached directly to the center of the feeder. There are some that are more off to the side on a little attachment there, right? So are you comfortable with how that attaches? Do you think if you have like critters in your yard, can they potentially knock it over? If you want to charge the camera, if you don't have good access for a solar panel, can you easily remove the camera without taking the whole feeder down and charge it from inside before placing it back out? And again, those add-on accessories. Are there certain features you want to add later on down the line? And of course, for these feeders to work in the first place, you have to have access to Wi-Fi. So the distance you can have the smart feeder from your modem will vary depending on the model. So you can have some that can be anywhere from 35 feet away from the modem to 100 feet away from the modem. Oftentimes when you're testing placement, they'll have you kind of test it with like the smartphone app a little bit, but definitely keep that in mind. And depending on where you're placing it, that will allow you to consider other options, so protecting from critters and other things as well too. So definitely kind of keep those things in mind. You also need 2.4 gigahertz connection, which I didn't double check. I'm not a good internet wizard. I'm sorry. I believe you can check on the back of the modem to see what kind of connection you have, but if I'm wrong with that, I'll have to double check. I apologize. Other aspects to consider with these smart feeders. Oftentimes there can be a subscription service. Whether that's a monthly or yearly fee is up to you, but this often opens up a few extra features that weren't accessible with that first mainline tier. So things like cloud storage, that bird ID capability, or replaying old videos or photos, may be something more attached to that subscription service. So there will probably be different prices for different models. So definitely keep that in mind. Oftentimes there are certain ones that have a live stream service that does not require payment. So that baseline where you just kind of can open up the app and see what's going on at your feeders, and it still notifies you to let you know what birds are popping up. So again, you can still utilize these without the subscription service, but that usually does have like a few other things as well. In regards to placement and different things to consider that way as well. We talked about that solar power, like battery charging option. One of the things I want to point out about that is some models have one solar panel while others have two solar panels. I've heard that does make a difference in regards to how well it charges, or how much how long like the battery goes for that as well too. Another thing as well is with the seasons, obviously lighting changes. So you might have better charging in the summertime than the wintertime, depending on the angle of the camera. So paying attention to that as well can be important. Sun glare, of course, at the camera can be important too. So if you face it directly east or directly west where the sun rises or sets and you have birds checking out the feeder, you may not get the best visibility of them in the morning. So be mindful of what angle your bird feeder is being placed at. And the most important thing that I cannot stress enough with people that are getting these feeders is critter control, because these feeders are oftentimes not not inexpensive, right? They can range anywhere from $90 to $100 to $200, depending on the model that you get. And I would hate to put an investment in that and then have it immediately knocked over and damaged because we have squirrels, raccoons, or deer in our yard, right? So when you're figuring out placement, some things to consider. If you have squirrels or raccoons in your yard, squirrels, you can baffle a system if you have 10-foot clearance around where you are putting the feeder. So if your feeder is 10 feet away from all trees, house, deck, lawn furniture, shrubs, bird bath, anything that they could potentially jump from, you can baffle it, because squirrels can jump about 9.5 feet across. If they're really tenacious, they could try farther, but that's going to give you that good clearance. And then they only can jump about like 3.5 feet up. So that if you need a little bit more room, 5-foot clearance is great for baffling a setup. If you do not have the clearance for a baffle, hot pepper food is also an option. Hot pepper food is hot and spicy to squirrels and raccoons, but not to the birds. Birds have different taste buds, so they don't taste hot or spicy with that at all, which is really nice. Safflower is also an option. Safflower is usually bitter to the squirrel's taste. It's kind of like a frontline defense option, so they'll either like it or they won't. So that's kind of a good starter option. The only thing about that is that oftentimes with the hot pepper or the safflower, the squirrels and raccoons can still get up there and still investigate and kind of see what's going on. So again, for those three options, raccoons can be stopped by baffles or hot pepper. Squirrels can potentially be stopped by baffles, hot pepper food, or safflower as well. Deer are tricky. So potentially a very tall system, so that might make it harder to access the feeder itself. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as you're kind of figuring that out. And then also, sometimes people put their smart feeders in place where they can also view their other feeders. So sometimes that can be really fun. You can have a really cool setup that has just kind of a menagerie of activity, depending on how you have it set up and the placement in comparison to other things as well. So keep that in mind too. That's always fun things to kind of consider there. When it comes to hanging versus mounting, really depends on you. I feel like hanging setups can sometimes be a little bit more difficult to protect against predators depending on like where you have it set up. And the only thing I've heard from some customers that have had these types of feeders before is that sometimes you can have minor swaying with the camera, which for some people that's not an issue. For others, that's like a major problem. So definitely keep in mind as to whether or not you care if that's a factor. Oftentimes, of course, you can hang them on a pole system or on a tree limb. If you have a covered porch hook, you can also set it up there. In areas that it's closer to the house, using de-shelled blends for less mess is fantastic and just keeps things more simple. Mounting setups usually might be easier to protect against. These can be a little bit more versatile with height, location, and you also don't have that swaying factor. It's easier to baffle or to move around to potential areas. You can also have deck setups as well too, depending on like what you have going on. And again, you can use depending on the model that you have, a lot of them have like L-shaped brackets that you can utilize that can allow for like posting or wrapping around a tree chunk, screwing into a post, or essentially establishing on the top of the pole system. I know Bird Buddy flanges have like that 1-inch diameter, which makes it super easy to add for our pole system. In other cases, we've also done like the easy attach setup where we did have to screw a hole through a metal bracket, but that did allow it to secure really well so it could still hook onto the side of a system. Oftentimes, for a lot of the different types that you have, you can use a flange, because again, like the metal doesn't always line up for like the where you can screw into it, right? So you could do a piece of wood or recycled material in between a flange and just kind of screw in both sides so you have it secured that way as well. A lot of people have come in to have us mount a lot of these different types of features, so we've gotten a little crafty. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask us as well too. Lots of different ways to do it. One other thing I will mention in general too, in regards to the solar panel, if it is directly attached to the feeder or otherwise, there are ways to mount a setup so you have the solar panel, the feeder, and everything all on one pole system. The one thing that I'll mention is if you cannot baffle that setup, I would be concerned about the wire that runs from the solar panel to the feeder and potentially squirrels checking that out or potentially gnawing wires. So be mindful of that as, again, you're looking into different types of models and different features as well. Now, one of the things that people really enjoy about these feeders is the identification aspect. So again, a lot of these feeders have photo recognition software that basically takes your photo and image and compares it to a whole library of images before being like, yes, this is your best match. I will say some brands have better ID than others. It also depends on what library they're taking from. So some of these may be focused for like worldwide, more European based, anything like that. So I have had some people bring in their photos and tell me that the recognition software told them it was a parrot when it was in fact a cardinal. And it's one of those things where, as someone that has done this long enough, I do know the difference and distinction. So sometimes you have some brands that are a little bit better than others. So I would always, if you're looking at those identification tools, double check. Never hurts. When it comes to identification as well and trying to ID your birds, there are going to be some lighting variables depending on the time of day, how stark the shadows are, depending on the camera color as well. So some of that can be very important as well. Depending on the angle of the bird, you might not always have the best visibility. Depending on, like, again, the camera, maybe there's like slight distortion as well. For the most part, they're all usually pretty straightforward, so nothing too crazy. But this is just some example of like that stark shadow you can have. So sometimes your colors may not quite look right. Eastern bluebirds, like the females anyways, are very light in coloration. So I could easily see somebody that's new to bird ID potentially confusing this for a wren, just because it has a slightly longer beak as well. So this is because your birds are so up close. It's also a great tool for starting to get used to bird ID and starting to practice with that as well too, which is really fun. So some things, and these are just like some different examples of like different angles and stuff as well too. This one obviously marked them all right as well too. So you got like your Carolina Wren, your Carolina Chickadee, and your Northern Cardinal. The only thing I'll mention about the Cardinal is it is a juvenile, so you don't have that bright orange beak. The crest is not raised, and there's very subtle red in the side. So I could definitely see that somebody being thrown by a loop for that as well too. Carolina Wren, the eyebrow isn't as visibly seen, so sometimes that can be a little tricky as well. And then sometimes, if the lighting's bad and you just have a circle, that can make it tricky too. But just different things to consider when you're using that photo recognition software. So I did want to point out, because again, sometimes that software is blocked behind a paywall, so it depends on if you're up for that or not. So if you're not and you're kind of looking to ID these birds yourselves, let's talk a little bit about some different steps you would take in order to try and identify your birds, right? So one thing I will mention that makes it really fun and a good way to break it down is, instead of focusing on the color pattern first, focus on the shape and the size. So comparing it to different individuals you've seen at the feeder can be very helpful too. Is it closer in size to a sparrow, a robin, a crow, or a goose, or any others? Like if it's closer to a cardinal, if it's closer to a goldfinch, so what you've seen, whatever you can kind of associate that size with can make it help easier to kind of identify for yourself as well too. Birds of the same scientific family will share similar traits. That does not mean you have to know the scientific family. You just have to be able to know, oh, these birds kind of have the same type of shape, so maybe they're related. Maybe I can get a little bit more information there, right? So this is just a silhouette of like the different types of kind of families you might have. Nuthatches, we have a few different species, but you know they can go up and down on the trunk of a tree. They often have a shorter tail. They'll often kind of look at you as they're facing downwards. Doves, both mourning doves and pigeons, are in the same family. They have that same kind of bowling ball pin shape, whereas small head, big body. Finches have a more upright posture, kind of a thicker bill as well. Thrushes, robins, and bluebirds are both in the same family, even though they're different sizes. So kind of a longer, thinner bill, kind of a little portly, but I love that about them. They're very cute. So woodpeckers as well are all in the same family. Longer beak, kind of a stiffer tail feathers, very upright, stiff posture. So all of those things can kind of help you with that shape and size aspect. And when you're looking at shape and size, paying attention to things like the head first and the beak shape can also give you an idea of what kind of food they eat. Yeah, so like what kind of food they eat, what kind of style they go for, which can also help break down different types of family things. Their wings, are they longer than the body? Are they pointed, curved, and then the tail as well? Is it kind of just a square tail when it's at rest? Is it kind of notched in the center when they're in flight? Does it kind of have those like diamond shape as well? So all these factors can be very important to consider. Not that you'll be seeing those at the feeder, but just if you see them take off or see some of those things, it can be helpful. At that point, then I would focus on the color pattern. So start with the head and the chest. Do you see any stripes or eyebrows or eye rings? Does the chest have any type of streaking or speckling? Because that can all be helpful with ID as well. Do the wings have any form of wing bars? Like goldfinches have a white wing bar on very black wings. Or on the tail, are there outer tail feathers that are a different color than inner tail feathers? Are they tipped at the end with a different color? Lots of stuff like that. So break it down, focus on the head, focus on the chest, then the wings, and then the tail, because that will give you the most descriptors to work with as well. Behaviors can also be really helpful too. So certain birds like eastern phoebes or those hermit thrushes will do a lot of tail or wing flicking. So basically, even though they're staying still, they might still bob those types of those body parts. So that can also help ID compared to different species. And then depending on when you see this individual, knowing as to whether or not they're a year-round species, a summer resident, winter resident, or a migrant can also be helpful. So basically, for that, I just know, make sure that you know that that bird can potentially be in range in this area. Some people say that we've had like ladder-backed woodpeckers in their yard, but those are more of a western species. So they probably had more of a downy or a hairy woodpecker. So just kind of making sure you're narrowing it down that way too. So for the most part, for a lot of this, when you're having them like at the feeders, we're going to be looking at shape and size and color pattern there as well too. And just an example, because the white-throated sparrow is one that we do have during this time of year. Just kind of, if we're looking at the shape, we know they have a smaller beak, they have a larger head, not much of a neck, they have a longer tail, and for sparrows, they're kind of like perched a little bit more horizontally, right? So looking at their colors on their head, these guys have a lot of distinctive factors. So they've got black and white stripes on the head. The white-throated sparrows also have yellow eyebrows, which is what I call them. You know, there's other names, but it's easier that way to just kind of say those yellow eyebrows. And of course, they do have that white throat. So any of those factors that you can pull out while you're watching the birds at your feeders can be super helpful. For this one, we don't really see their belly, but they don't really have too much streaking there, and that's okay. There's a lot to kind of work with outside of that. Their wings have a lot of brown and black barring as well. And then their tail's a little bit longer. It doesn't look like it has any notches or anything there either, but it's more of just kind of a standard darker brown as well too. So kind of breaking things down by that way can also make it easier for other people to help you ID too, or it can kind of help you with what you're looking for. And then knowing the difference between your males, females, or juveniles. So if these birds have the same shape, for example, that juvenile cardinal, but you're not sure if it's the same species, take a look as to whether or not those color patterns can change depending on, again, whether they're a male, whether they're a female, or whether they have just, they're from like the current nesting season, because that can vary. Some species all look the same, others will have their differences. So just make sure to keep that in mind as you're trying to ID. Some other things I'm going to point out as well is there are some great phone app resources you can utilize. Technically, there are two primarily that I know of, Merlin ID or Audubon. Both provide pretty good description about the birds that you're looking for. I know Audubon has bird alerts, and it's primarily used for like the US and Canada. However, Merlin ID is a little bit more widespread in regards to usage. There's international birding packs, so if you're going around the world, that can be really helpful there. It's also super easy to use, and you can use photo ID, sound ID, or step-by-step ID. So this is a great resource for new individuals. It's also a great resource if you don't have the option of using that, the the AI identification that's in the smart feeders, right? So you can easily take a screenshot of a bird, put it through Merlin ID, and kind of get the same resources as well, which is really fun. So just an example of what that step-by-step ID means. Essentially what it does is it asks you a few questions, and you answer them to the best of your ability. So it's going to ask you where you saw the bird, in which case you put your location, about what size was the bird, so comparing it as best you can to another size that you may have seen. So was it close to a cardinal? Was it close to a robin? You know, all that kind of stuff. It'll ask what the main colors were, in which case you put down the colors that you saw to the best of your ability. Where was the bird? In this case, it's eating at a feeder because for the most part, we're just talking about with the smart feeders here. And once you do that, once you answer those questions, it comes with a full list of the birds that could be found in your area, depending on like what's going on, right? So in this case, I'm going to say the red-winged blackbird. Excuse me. The red-winged blackbird was the bird that I was looking for, in which case you can find a lot of information about when they are usually present in the area, more background information on their songs and calls, lots of really good details and different photos as well, because I know the males and the females of that species do look different as well too. So Merlin ID is a great resource. It's free to use. You might just need to sign up with an email to like have an account there, but it's a great resource for beginner birders, intermediate birders. I know that I'm not great at sound ID, so I'll occasionally use it to kind of give me an idea and double check that that is indeed the bird that I'm looking for. So definitely great options to kind of consider there as well too. Different book resources as well. Sibley, Audubon, and Peterson all organize the books by scientific family, but they use a lot of illustrations, and sometimes they'll have the birds in various poses, so you get a very good idea of what you're looking for. Crossley ID and Birds of the Carolinas both use photos, right? Crossley will often use photos and kind of like take the different angles of the bird and put it into kind of a collage. So you can see the different angles, different lighting, how those birds normally look and the different poses there. Birds of the Carolinas, so this one with the purple, oh my goodness, purple cover here. A great, easy resource for those of us that live in this area, in the South Carolina, obviously. It organizes the birds by color. So in each section, you have blue birds, black and white birds, brown birds, and it also sorts by size. So in the beginning, you have your smaller birds. As you get through the category, you get to your larger birds. So it doesn't have as many photos, but it gives you a great place to start when you're looking at ID in general as well, too. So both of those resources are really good. If you want to learn more about Merlin ID, feel free to stop in the store. I know Tim is a Merlin ID wizard, so I'm sure he has no problem kind of breaking down all those different factors as well. I'm really good about using book resources, so if you have any questions on that, I'm happy to answer those too. In regards to other resources as well, Cornell Lab of Ornithology obviously has fantastic options to consider. Allaboutbirds.org is where you can get a lot of basic bird ID guides and comparison. They also have the live bird cams, whether that's nesting, bird feeders, all that kind of stuff. And if you're looking to get more information about certain birds in general, they also have a bird academy that you can check out too. MacaulayLibrary.org, if I ever say that right, I have no idea. Is a great resource that basically it's an archive. So people upload photos and videos of really interesting behaviors and bird activity. So if you ever get a really cool video from your feeder, feel free to upload it in there so other people can take a look as to what's going on. Great resource there. And of course, ebird.org is where you can also update information. So if you see a really interesting bird that is not usually in the area, you can upload it to that website, let other people know it's in the area, and of course, utilizing Merlin ID as needed too. So hopefully that provided some good information for you guys to get started with. With smart feeders, there's a lot of different brands, so it can be very overwhelming to kind of figure things out. Again, if you ever have questions or you're trying to compare or contrast, feel free to ask and we can give our best opinion as to what would work best for your yard as well too. But with that being said, if you're looking to potentially shop today, we have a coupon for $5 off a $25 purchase or more. The code is SMART. Feel free to remember that and just mention it at checkout if you want to use that. Only available today, either in store or through a phone order as well too. We have a second viewing of this presentation in store at 11 in case anybody's interested in stopping by that you know of that hasn't seen this presentation yet. And I'll also be moving this presentation over to YouTube later. So if you feel like that would be helpful for somebody else, feel free to share it with them as well too. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope this helped give you some good background on it. And I will see you guys next month. So have a great day. Thanks. Bye.